Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Robin Dwyer. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. Setting China's agenda. A week of political discussions concludes in Beijing as the country's top legislature's annual session comes to an end. An aid ship destined for Gaza remains docked in Cyprus as Ramadan begins with no sign of a ceasefire deal. And the centre-right wins the most seats in Portugal's general election, but support for the far-right surges. It's been a week that set out plans mapping China's future path. Decision-makers gathering in Beijing to review and approve thousands of policy proposals affecting people right across the country. Those meetings are now over for another year, as our correspondent Feng Yilei reports.
After voting on all draft resolutions, the two sessions set an ambitious agenda for the world's second-largest economy in 2024. Key targets announced include around 5% GDP growth, over 12 million new urban jobs, and 650 million tons of grain output. This year marks the 75th anniversary of founding to the nation, as well as a critical year of the 14th five-year plan to reach the economic development goals. President Xi Jinping and other Chinese leaders attended the closed meeting at the Great Hall of the People. Zhao Leji, chairman of China's top legislature's standing committee, delivers a speech at the closing meeting.
During the conference, our deputies have bared the trust and responsibilities of the party and the people. They have performed their duty in high spirit. They have deliberated and reviewed the proposals of various types. The result of this meeting has fully demonstrated the alliance of the will of the party and the will of the people. It also showcased the advantage of the whole process people's democracy and China's fundamental political system.
Thousands of delegates from across the country put forward nearly 300 bills and over 7,000 suggestions, with a focus on propelling China's high-quality development, covering areas like deepening reforms, improving people's livelihoods. There was a keen focus on the need to boost self-reliance in core technologies through innovation while upgrading traditional industries.
We must follow the people-centered development approach and practice the whole process, people's democracy, respect people's will, their experience and their rights, and also utilize their innovation and mobilize the whole society in engaging in entrepreneurship and innovation, and mobilize our resources and strengths to march ahead.
Upbeat yet pragmatic, that seems to be the overriding spirit of this year's two sessions. Despite complex global challenges, China has expressed strong resolve to forge ahead on a path of modernization through reform, innovation, and greater opening up. And that confidence is expected to help uphold global stability and prosperity. Feng Yilei, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Penina Karebe, who's in Beijing. So, Penina, one of the focuses of this year's two sessions has been China's foreign policy. What messages has the country sent about that?
Oh, Robin, no surprises really. It's been a very consistent message as what we've heard previously from China, and that is when it comes, of course, to its relationship with the international community. It is going to be an independent participant. It is going to be impartial. An example was given of the conflicts that we have in Ukraine and in Gaza, and earlier on last week we heard from the Foreign Minister Wang Yi using those two examples and saying that China has remained very much impartial and that China is advocating for peace. And that was also another thing we heard very strongly from the foreign minister, China talking about mediation, negotiation as a way of resolving conflicts. And give an example of China's role in mediating between Iran and Saudi Arabia and say that China has drawn from its historical culture of talking with people, of bringing all parties to the table. And that is what it has brought to the international table. But also apart from that, we have seen really China trying to open up. It's also another message we heard from the country during these two sessions that it's going to deepen reforms and open up. And we did hear from Wang Yi again announcing visa exceptions from 6 European countries starting this month. So pretty much that is what has been coming out of this past 1 week, Robin.
And Penina, you've been there all week covering these meetings. What are your impressions?
Well, you know, Robin, it was the first time for me to cover the two sessions. I flew in all the way from Nairobi, and my biggest impression of this the 1 week I've been here really is just the effort the country has made to open up, to try and make it as open as possible. We understand there were at least 3,000 accredited journalists, both local and foreign, and that really opened up this process to especially foreign media to just try and understand what this process is all about. I also witnessed ambassadors of very many countries represented here in China that were invited to the opening sessions of both the CPCC and the NPC. I spoke to some of the ambassadors, especially from Africa, and they were saying that it was important for them to be included because it would help them align their policies with the rules that are being formulated here in Beijing, for them to reap the most out of the relationship they have with China. There were press conferences happening all through from these deputies and the members of the CPCC, and all of that, Robin, was just an effort to try and make it as open, make it as inclusive as possible. And I guess for me, that was my biggest takeaway, because coming in as a foreigner, of course, they have these preconceived notions that it is very much a closed process. And speaking to some of my Chinese colleagues, they did say that for the last 4 years during the COVID pandemic, it wasn't as open as it was this time around.
Penina, thank you very much. That correspondent Penina Karibe in Beijing. China's envoy for Eurasian affairs is in France for further talks on the Ukraine conflict. Li Hui has been on a diplomatic tour since the start of March, visiting Moscow, Brussels, Poland, Ukraine and Germany. Beijing says the aim of the discussions has been to promote a ceasefire and possible peace talks.
On the issue of Ukraine, China has always upheld an objective and fair stance and actively promoted the value of peace talks. We would support an international peace conference agreed upon by both Russia and Ukraine, with equal participation by all parties and fair discussions on all peace options. China is willing to play a constructive role in the political settlement of the Ukraine crisis.
Ukraine has rebuffed a suggestion by the Pope that it should negotiate an end to the conflict with Russia. President Zelensky accused Pope Francis of engaging in virtual mediation, while Ukraine's foreign minister said Kyiv would never capitulate. It comes after he said that losing sides should show the courage of the white flag. The Kremlin called the Pope's comments understandable and said Russia was ready to sit down for talks. The United States has airlifted non-essential staff from its embassy in Haiti as chaos in the country worsens. The US has also deployed troops to improve security after armed gangs attacked the National Palace and the Interior Ministry over the weekend. Thousands of people have fled their homes as gangs wage anti-government violence, while President Ariel Henry remains stranded in Puerto Rico. Caribbean leaders are holding emergency talks to discuss the crisis. A ship carrying much-needed aid for Gaza remains docked in Cyprus, despite hopes that it would set sail this weekend. Organisers say that technical difficulties are preventing it from leaving as work continues on a jetty in Gaza. Some aid agencies have criticised plans for sending aid by sea, saying it will do little to ease the crisis. More than 31,000 people are now said to have been killed in Gaza since the conflict began on October the 7th. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Evangelos Tsipsas, who's in Larnaca, where this ship is docked. So, Evangelo, what's happening now with this aid delivery?
Well, I wish I could say that the boat has left the port and it's on its way to deliver that humanitarian aid. But unfortunately, since the day we arrived here, we've been hearing pretty much from the Cypriot government that every hour, every 2 hours, the vessel is going to leave, it's going to leave, but it's still here. As you mentioned there yesterday, last night, there were some activity going on. We saw that vessel moved away from the port with the floating jetty having about 150 tons of humanitarian aid in the back. But then after a few hours, we saw it docking back. And we wondered what the issue was. The Cypriot government didn't give out much information, at least until early morning. What they told us was it was logistical issues and there were some technical problems that they were facing. And once we asked them what was that, they didn't really have an answer to it. But after speaking, after the hours going by, we heard from the foreign ministry saying that the major problem that they're now facing is that of not having a floating pier off the coast of Gaza to be able to deliver that humanitarian aid. Now, first, it was from the Israeli side that they had to do extensive security checks to make sure that the ship is all safe so it can set sail. They got the green light last night, but again, it came back and it docked because of those technical reasons. And now, if we think about if that is what the main reason is, then they could perhaps be here behind in the port of Larnaca even for more days or weeks, because in order to build that pier off the coast of Gaza, it's going to take, as the U.S. Military is saying, up to 2 months with the help of 1,000 soldiers. So that could last quite some time, and the people who will need this humanitarian aid could possibly not receive it, at least until the next 36 to 48 hours, as it was planned for them to get it early on Monday once the Ramadan Eve started.
Evangelo, thank you very much. Our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas in Larnaca. On the first full day of Ramadan, Saudi Arabia's King Salman has spoken of what he called heinous crimes in Gaza, casting a long shadow over the holy month. Well, let's go to Gaza now and talk to our correspondent, Noor Harazin. So, Noor, how are people observing Ramadan?
Well, yes, Robin. Normally, in the first day of Ramadan, Palestinians here in Gaza will go out to the markets, buy some good quantities of food and goods, supplies for the holy month of Ramadan, buy some lights and decorations for their homes. But this is one different Ramadan. People are afraid, they are depressed, they are also living in the fear of being killed at any moment, especially with the continuous Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip, even in the green areas like Middle Gaza and Rafah. So yes, Ramadan this year is very different to the Palestinian people, and even though that they had big hopes actually over the past few weeks that maybe Hamas and Israel would come to a ceasefire agreement. However, now they are living through the fact that maybe until the end of Ramadan there will be no ceasefire, and they actually have to cope with this situation, and they have to cope with the very little goods and supplies available in the markets.
And there are reports that 2 more children have died of starvation in northern Gaza. What can you tell us?
Well, yes, this morning the Kamal Udwan Hospital, which is located in Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza, said that 2 more children died this morning because of the starvation, and this brings up the death toll in the Gaza Strip up to 27 people. Most of them are actually children who died because of the starvation over the past 3 weeks here in Gaza. And yes, the situation in northern Gaza is just deteriorating. We are talking about a famine, malnutrition. I mean, people in the north are starving. In some areas, actually, in the north, it reached a point where people have nothing to eat. They are feeding on the grass on the streets, and some of them are feeding on the feed of the animals. So yes, the situation there is very, very, very hard. Even here in southern Gaza, I mean, I am in the city of Rafah, where much of the aid is being allowed to Gaza. However, most of this aid is some canned food, some food that is being sold at very expensive price, and this is because the very little amount of humanitarian aid that is being allowed to the Gaza Strip.
Noor, thank you very much. Our correspondent Noor Harazin in Rafah in Gaza. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected comments from US President Joe Biden that he is hurting Israel more than helping it. He's once again promised to move ahead with plans for a military offensive in Rafah, where over 1 million Palestinians are sheltering. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Sarah Coates, who's in Jerusalem. So, Sarah, tell us more about the Prime Minister's response to those comments from Joe Biden.
Hello, Robin. This really highlights the growing daylight, the growing friction between the Biden administration and Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking out in direct defiance of what we heard from President Biden, who called an operation in Rafah a red line. Netanyahu spoke out during a television interview last night. He said, "We are going there. I have a red line, and you know what that red line is, to ensure October 7 never happens again." And what we've been hearing from the international community is condemnation against Israel and Israel's plans to push down into that southern city of Rafah, where we know that around 1.3 million internally displaced Palestinians are sheltering, with no plan as yet, Robin, as to where these people should go. But here, domestically, it certainly seems like there is widespread approval for Netanyahu's plan to push into Rafah. A poll released late yesterday showing that 75% of Jewish Israelis agree that this should happen.
And Sarah, it's now the first full day of Ramadan, the Muslim holy month. What's the mood like in Jerusalem?
It really is a city on edge. This is a flashpoint area, even when a war is not ongoing. Behind me, you can see the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That is the third holiest place in Islam, and we're really already seeing some signs that this region could explode, that this flashpoint area could really see an increase in violence. Overnight, very heavily armed Israeli border guards blocked dozens and dozens of young Muslim worshippers from actually entering that mosque behind me. So certainly seeing signs there that this could really get ugly. And we are hearing from Jordan's Foreign Minister, Ayman Safadi. He came out just a few hours ago to say that these restrictions by Israel on access to the Al-Aqsa is pushing the situation toward an explosion. And really, when you walk around the old city at a time like this during Ramadan, it is very festive. It's a time when people get together, they decorate the streets. But this year, the mood is extremely somber. Here's one of the men that works very close to here.
In the beloved Gaza, we are witnessing famine, genocide, destruction, war and the pain which every Palestinian feels. So we decided this year that the old city of Jerusalem won't be decorated in respect of the blood of our children and the elders and the martyrs.
And Robin, we are here on the ground for you and we'll be monitoring this situation very, very closely.
Sarah, thank you very much. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Jerusalem. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the centre-right wins the most seats in Portugal's general election, but support for the far-right surges.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Setting China's agenda. A week of political discussions concludes in Beijing as the country's top legislature's annual session comes to an end. And an aid ship destined for Gaza remains docked in Cyprus as Ramadan begins with no sign of a ceasefire deal. Portugal's centre-right Democratic Alliance has won the country's general election but failed to gain a majority. They only narrowly beat the Socialists, while the far-right Chega party won 4 times as many seats as it had before. The winning party leader has vowed not to rely on the far-right to govern. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Ken Brown in Lisbon. So, Ken, this was a pretty dramatic night for Portuguese politics. What's going on today?
Yeah, it certainly was, Robin. A very late night. I'll be honest with you, I didn't realise how wild political parties can get. We were with the centre-right Democratic Alliance as they celebrated narrowly defeating their old Socialist Party rivals, but they didn't manage to win an outright majority. So there were political analysts arguing with political scientists about combinations and coalitions and how anyone could form a government until the wee hours of the morning. Really unhinged stuff there. Portugal's political panorama really changed last night, a dramatic change. It was a snap election called after the former socialist Prime Minister Antonio Costa stepped aside amid corruption allegations and police raids. Voters deserted the party for the right in yesterday's election, but not really for the traditional centre-right party. The biggest winner was the far-right Chega, who have now established themselves as the country's third political force in a nation where the big two parties have alternated power since 1979. So the result of this new election means a fragmented reality where neither of the big two can govern alone. Both of them reject going into government with Chega, and we heard from Luis Montenegro, the leader of the centre-right party today. He said that the socialists should allow them to go into power in some sort of deal that would, the socialists would abstain in an investiture, for example. That would mean they would govern without the far right. Pedro Nuno Santos is the leader of the socialists, the new leader. He rejects the deal that's on the table at the moment. So, as I mentioned, a really complicated scene. We could even see new, fresh elections called before the end of the year, which would mean a 4th general election in only 5 years, Robin. Celebrations at the centre-right Democratic Alliance headquarters began early as they narrowly defeated the incumbent Socialist Party, with almost 30% of the vote to around 28.7%. While final numbers are still pending, this will most likely be the final result. Celebration speeches, however, were tempered.
Os portugueses falaram e disseram.
The Portuguese people have spoken. They've said they want a change of government. They've said they want a change in policies. And the Portuguese people want the big parties to be able to reinvent themselves and to show that they can innovate.
As portuguesas e os portugueses querem que os grandes partidos possam apresentar-se de forma renovada e com capacidade de inovar.
While the Democratic Alliance may have won the most votes, they haven't won an outright majority. And that's because of the rise of the far-right party Chega, who achieved a historic result, more than doubling their 2022 election numbers, winning some 18% of the vote. It cast Chega, which means enough in Portuguese, as potential kingmakers. And their leader, André Ventura, Sunday night declared Portugal's era of bipartisanship as over. The new Socialist Party leader, Pedro Nuno Santos, who took over from scandal-embroiled former Prime Minister Antonio Costa, acknowledged defeat.
O Partido Socialista.
The Socialist Party will be the party of opposition. We will reform the party and try to bring back those who are unhappy.
So will Portugal have a government anytime soon? Potential combinations include the centre-right and the far-right joining forces, but Montenegro has promised not to go into a government with Chega. In a TV debate, he called Ventura's ideas and policies xenophobic, racist, populist and excessively demagogic. But Montenegro could form a government with Chega's passive support. The other possibility is the socialists allowing the AD to govern in minority, thus avoiding having the far right in power. Forming a government could take weeks, potentially months, and will require some very creative compromises after an election that has left Portugal with more questions than answers.
Our correspondent Ken Brown in Lisbon, thank you very much. The South Korean government has begun the process of suspending the medical licenses of nearly 5,000 striking junior doctors. The walkout, which began on the 20th of February, is over plans to increase the number of medical students, which Seoul says will alleviate staff shortages. Doctors argue that that will erode service quality and want pay concerns to be addressed first. Nearly 12,000 junior doctors are still on strike, or 93% of the trainee workforce, causing severe disruption to healthcare. At least 50 people were injured when a LATAM Airlines plane experienced a sudden drop in altitude midway through a flight. The carrier blamed a technical problem, which it said caused a strong movement during the flight from Sydney to Auckland. Local media reported that some passengers have been thrown from their seats. Britain's Princess of Wales has apologised after admitting that an official family photo was edited. Several leading news organisations recalled the image of Princess Catherine and her 3 children, saying they believed the photo was manipulated. The picture, taken by Prince William, was the first to be released of Catherine since she had abdominal surgery in January. The headlines again. Setting China's agenda. A week of political discussions concludes in Beijing as the country's top legislature's annual session comes to an end. An aid ship destined for Gaza remains docked in Cyprus as Ramadan begins, with no sign of a ceasefire deal. And the centre-right wins the most seats in Portugal's general election, but support for the far-right surges. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to Europe's weather forecast, starting with atmospheric circulation. Under influence of low vortex, there will be still a wide range of precipitation across parts of the continent over the next few days. So let's first take a closer look at what weather by Tuesday. There could be light rain and localized mild rainfall building up for much of western all the way to central Europe, stretching down towards into the south. Meanwhile, you could also expect a light or moderate snow in parts of Russia. Then as we get into Wednesday, you could see the wet weather will move eastward. So back to Iberian Peninsula, there could be mostly a partly sunny sky. And now talking about the maximum temperatures, there could be still below freezing temperatures for daily highs in certain spots across northern and eastern Europe by Tuesday. If you're living across the west by Wednesday, as the precipitation moves away, the daily highs are very likely to touch lower 20s. And your business and travel outlook by Wednesday could have still mid-teens for daily highs in London, Paris, with showers down to Madrid and also Lisbon. You could have milder temperatures, readings be around 20 degrees Celsius. Eventually down to the south, see plenty of sunshine for Milan, 20 to 2.